Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. I wish I had a good news final here to bring you from what Luke Jones will forever refer to as the lost Father's Day weekend of the Red Sox. You know what? When the Red Sox used to come in and sweep the Orioles, away and beat them up like that, it used to be like, civic pain and all that. And instead, we just moved to the West Coast and take our lickings here at this point. I will say this. It was Father's Day weekend. Happy Father's Day weekend to you, Luke. I know you always celebrate the life of your father as I do myself. We see it all over our timelines. But bad news final out of Baltimore this weekend. And this isn't shocking. I don't even know why we're talking about it other than they do play baseball and you go and visit and whatnot. But it is really, really something if you do spend 3 hours a day with this baseball team right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's just, you really have to search for the positives. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, there's a few individuals, bright spots here and there. I mean, we saw John Means pitch Sunday. I mean, it wasn't his best outing, but kid has a 2.67 ERA. I mean, it's not as though this team's completely devoid of any positives, but
he is their 72 Steve Carlton.
Yeah, but they're 21-50. I mean, and it's not shocking. I think anyone who was at all objective or even cautiously optimistic and liking Mike Elias and liking the new regime. And believe me, I'm still very much on board with what they're doing from a long-term standpoint, but this was always going to be what 2019 was going to be all about, just a lot of losing, not a whole lot to write home about in terms of individuals. And I think what's disappointing, and this was really highlighted in the 9th and 10th innings on Sunday with Michael Givens, is some of the guys that you pointed to as short-term, present-day assets, whether you're talking about guys you would potentially build around or in most cases, guys that you're looking to deal at the trade deadline or at some point here in the not-too-distant future, there aren't a lot of those guys thriving. And Michael Givens, who 2 months ago, you could have made an argument was their most attractive major league trade piece, other than maybe Trey Mancini, just because of how much control Mancini still has. Givens has a 5.28 ERA, gave up the game-tying home run to a guy who had one career home run, and that was also against Michael Givens, Marco Hernandez in the 9th inning, and then Rafael Devers hits an absolute bomb in the 10th inning. And to see Givens struggle the way he has now for about a month, he has not been good. That's just another reminder of, especially with the rebuild, not everything's going to go perfectly. In a perfect world, Michael Givens would have a 2 ERA right now, and the Orioles would be trading him at the deadline and thinking about potentially getting an Andrew Miller kind of return and trying to set themselves up even better for the future. But alas, it doesn't always happen that way, and Michael Givens has struggled. Some other guys that you looked at as potential trade pieces in the present, guys like Trumbo, guys like Alex Cobb, hurt. So,
well, I mean, let's cut to the chase. They probably have 5 or 6 major league players, maybe 8 or 9 if you want to stretch it out around the quad A edge of this, to say 3 or 4 might be attractive to someone back in spring training, to say these are 4 or 5 guys that are movable pieces. Let's move 2 or 3 of them by the trading deadline in a year we're going to lose 110 games or whatever it is. You'd like to think that the 5 major league guys they have would perform like major league players, and I'm not even talking about Chris Davis, who is his own sort of walking zombie again, right?
Sure. And, I mean, they've actually had some guys that, offensively speaking, and believe me, this isn't a good offense by any means, but it hasn't been horrendous in the way that we talk about the bullpen, for example, where the bullpen has just been god-awful. But the problem is some of the guys that have performed at a surprising level, a guy like a Pedro Severino, for example, who's swung the bat pretty darn well. We've talked about Dwight Smith. Ronaldo Nunez has 16 home runs. I'm not sure any of those guys, even with their numbers, not sure you're really selling another team on a guy like that to get anything of value that would make it worth holding on or make it worth moving on from the guy as opposed to holding on to them and just filling out your roster and hoping that maybe they turn into a decent piece a couple years from now that you could trade. So some of those established guys that we mentioned, it's just been very disappointing in that way. I mean, as you mentioned, Chris Davis is a completely different argument, different entity than any of these guys we're talking about. But Mark Trumbo just had another setback with his knee. You're hoping maybe he could hit for a month, and maybe you'd be able to deal him at the deadline if you pick up some of his remaining salary. Andrew Kashner had been really good early on. He hasn't been as good of late, has a 4.73 ERA. I think you still have a chance to move him, but you're not going to get anything of note for him. So you just go through the list, and other than Dylan Bundy, who has really come on and pitched quite well since about the start of May, Trey Mancini, of course, it's really, and John Means, and even with Means, you look at the ERA, but how young he is, and considering he wasn't highly touted whatsoever, is anyone really going to look at him as a real asset or someone the Orioles are just trying to catch lightning in a bottle with from a trade standpoint? So you don't really have a whole lot you can point to at the major league level right now and say, yeah, they can move that guy by July 31st, and they're going to get themselves a couple decent pieces that might be able to help for the future. Other than Mancini and Bundy, I'd put him in that category with the way that he's pitched the last month or so. It's just a lot of losing and not a whole lot of long-term gain, other than the fact that, well, they're keeping themselves in position to have the number one overall pick. But even with that, there are a couple other teams that are still kind of right on their heels for that dubious honor.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke, and Luke at WNST.net. I am wearing my Hammer and Nails shirt on the video cam on Facebook Live and our YouTube WNSTV channel. You get out there. We had a Father's Day special, but I'm going to be getting my hair cut this week. Manicure, pedicure. It is the ultimate man cave nirvana. It's in the town center in Owings Mills. You've heard me talk about it. You've seen me wear the shirt. Get in there. Get yourself a hot towel. Shave. Relax. Get an adult beverage. Watch a game, plan it around the game this weekend, whatever you're doing. Hammer and Nails in Owings Mills in the town center. Also, our friends over in Essex at Pat Rick's, my old stomping grounds. Don't forget, steak dinner and prime rib on Thursday night, just $11.99 in Essex. Tacos on Monday, shrimp on Tuesday, and the wings on Wednesday. It is Pat Rick's. That is a legendary place in Essex. We're appreciative of their sponsorship. Also, we did a great show with Matt Skura back there in the fall. Hope to get back down there again. Got down to the Modell Lyric last week. Hoping to get down there again later in the month. Diana Ross on the 30th. Johnny Lang. My wife said, take me to Johnny Lang on July 11th. I am. Ray LaMontagne as well in October. There is always magic at the Modell Lyric. I had a lot of friends taking their kids to JoJo Siwa last week. She was a nice young lady. We met her at the Super Bowl last year. Modell-lyric.com. Also, Sporticulture. The flowers around me on the set don't have today because my cat's been eating them lately, but I am going to have the lava lamp. So Sporticulture has the flowers and all the things they do out of Walnut Springs here in Maryland where they home grow flowers. They've been growing flowers for the Preakness for years. My friend Court has been doing that. But they have an entire line of other products that we're going to be showing you in football season. Go to Sporticulture.com to learn more about that. One more shout-out from my man Lee Tessier, the LLS Man and Woman of the Year was going on over the weekend. My friend Jen Dempsey was participating in that as well. That's how I got to know Lee Tessier. Lee Tessier and the Tessier team selling my condo. They can sell your home. If you need a real estate agent, somebody you could trust, somebody with 50 years of experience in and around the market, connecting buyers and sellers and doing it in the modern way. Go check out my listing. LeeTessier.com is the way to do that, and we'll get Lee on the program here later on in the month as well. Luke Jones has been running around Oriole Park at Camden Yards. Are you going with the Fred and Barney toothpick routine this week out in Oakland and Seattle? I mean, up late, last place baseball. I always love me a game in Oakland. You know that. I love foul territory, Luke.
Yeah, I mean, there's always something, if you have the schedule that affords it, and of course, we talk about this for a living. There's always something I've liked about West Coast baseball that you can kind of, you have your entire afternoon and evening to get some other stuff done, and then you settle in. But it's probably going to be tough to stay awake if the pitching and specifically the bullpen continues to perform the way it has.
Well, that's really the issue, right? I mean, the issue is I look up they're winning 2-1. I'm sitting in Costas. I look up they're losing 7-2. You know what I mean? Like, and it happens fast and furious, as we found out in the 10th inning on Sunday, right? Like, you can stay with the Red Sox 6 innings, 7 innings, 8 innings, but then it's who is the next arm in the bullpen and where did he come from, Frederick, Aberdeen, or Bowie? Literally, right?
No question. And really, the guy that's been their best bullpen arm has been the guy they acquired after the season started, Sean Armstrong. who
nobody in our audience has ever heard of. But go ahead.
Well, I mean,
my wife's shaking her head. She said, "Stretch Armstrong." What? Oh, I'm sorry.
If you've been watching the games, he's pitched a lot. So I mean, if you've been watching him on a nightly basis, and I realize that there are people that aren't doing.
But if you
that,
haven't in 3 weeks, you haven't heard of him.
but he's pitched well. Beyond that, I mean, he has an ERA for the Orioles. His ERA with Seattle was 14, even though it was only a few appearances. He has a 1.62 ERA for the Orioles, but after him, it's really difficult to identify anyone that they have guys that pitch well for a week or two at a time, and then Brandon Hyde says, okay, well, we don't have anyone else, so let's throw this guy into a seventh-inning situation where they're in a game, and that guy pitches well for a week or two. I mean, a great example of this was Brandon Klein. Not long ago was pitching well for them, and then he ran into a stretch where I think he gave up runs in 6 straight outings, and he's back in the minor leagues now. But you just look at their bullpen ERAs, and what's incredible, Nestor, is the Orioles' bullpen ERA, even though the gap has been shrunk considerably, they still don't have as bad of a bullpen ERA as the Nats do. And it really speaks to the issues they've had. Washington has a 6.27 bullpen ERA. The Orioles have a 6 bullpen ERA. But it's just been really difficult. And this is why I laugh. I mean, it is absolutely laughable when I see a fan on Twitter take a shot at Brandon Hyde. It's like, who do you want him to go to? I mean, what?
Oh, man, I'm on these fan pages, dude, and I don't know what to say. I don't want to be mean.
Has this, though. I mean, I'm not trying to pick on Orioles fans, but I just specifically, when I see criticism of Brandon Hyde, and look, I don't know if Brandon Hyde is a great manager yet. There are things about him I like, but I'm not going to deem someone as the guy that's going to lead them back to a World Series when he's managing a 21-50.
Yeah, you're not going to be Earl Weaver. Oh, by the way, I found a Sparky Anderson bumper for me, Luke Jones, that we're going to run in July.
Very nice.
Now, I knew I was going to. I spent the whole weekend doing baseball.
He wouldn't win with this team either.
Well, yeah, exactly. I was getting ready to say. I interviewed Tommy Lasorda. We're going to play that.
He wouldn't win with this team either.
I interviewed Earl Weaver, but I did not interview Casey Stengel. I just want to let you know that. I don't go back that far.
Very nice list there, but that's why, I mean, Brandon Hyde, and look, we talked about this back in December. He signed up for this. He knew that this is what he was getting into. I mean, this was just the truth. I mean, even if you were someone who thought they weren't going to be quite as bad as last year, you were still picking 100 losses. You were still picking worst team in the American League, certainly the worst team in the AL East, even if Toronto has been a little bit worse than some people maybe anticipated. But I just look at that bullpen. Who do you turn to trust? I mean, Michael Givens was supposed to be that guy. He was for about the first 4 weeks of the season, 5 weeks of the season, and it's been a major struggle for him since then. I mean, this is a guy who's given up, I think, 7, 8 home runs on the season, I believe. So it's just been a major struggle for him, and even some guys that have been a little more established than some of the other names, guys like Miguel Castro and Richard Bly are coming back from the injury. They've struggled. So beyond that, I mean, Paul Fry was good for a while. He's run into some struggles. And then you just have a laundry list of guys that just haven't gotten the job done. The Norfolk Shuttle. So even
I'm doing the numbers of how many guys have pitched for them. Are they at 25 yet?
Oh, I mean, it's up there. I mean, I think they are at, I want to say it's 27 total now, I believe. But
I got 25 in front of me, but I mean, between
that's counting 3 position players.
Yeah, between Hanser Alberto and Matt Wotherspoon and, Luis Ortiz, Chris Davis, Josh Rogers, Tanner Scott, Pedro Arujo got 2/3 of an inning in as well in a 27 ERA. It is quite the name. I mean, look, you were born, 83, right? So if you go back and look at the 88 Orioles and look at the roster of the names, it is an incredible list of Jay Tibbses, you know what I mean? And these names that were baseball cards to me when I was 19 years old. But I look at this and say, well, where is this going? Because there's going to have to be 10 other guys I haven't heard of between now and October, right? I mean, they're going to have 2 more guys a month every month coming into this thing that we haven't heard from yet, because none of these guys can do this, right?
Right. And probably a couple waiver waiver claims, guys like that. I mean, and they've already done that. You'll probably see more of that. I mean, just to speak where they are at the major league level and in the high minor leagues. Now, we've talked about the low minor leagues. There are quite a few pitchers that are attractive, but they're at single A. Beyond that, you look at Triple A. Keegan Aiken's the one guy you can identify, but they're really trying to focus on his development rather than throwing him into this dumpster fire that is the major league pitching situation.
There is no good reason, if you're running a minor league organization, to have anybody anywhere near Camden Yards right now.
Right. I mean, if you have guys, if someone's ready, that's another thing.
That's another story for the people who are paying to go and watch this caca. You know what I mean?
Well,
That's a whole different story. But if you're trying not to wreck kids, don't wreck kids.
Sure, and that's the smart thing to do, and that's something that the previous regime, because there was still an emphasis on trying to win at the major league level, then development be damned for guys like Kevin Gausman. And even last year, remember, they called up Hunter Harvey early in the season. He didn't pitch, but they called him up instead of letting him get into a routine at Double-A Bowie. You're seeing Mike Elias err on the side of development, and that's what I like seeing, and I'm glad to see that. I like the fact that just because they don't necessarily have other good options, they're not calling up someone like Keegan Aiken, who has shown promise at Norfolk, but is not a finished product yet. Let him develop. Let him pitch. If he's ready in August and September, then give him a cup of coffee in August and September, and then you look towards 2020.
We got all these guys with 7 and 8 ERAs. You bring an 8 pitcher up, that's what it'll look like, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly. But it was really illuminating as far as the lack of options they have at AAA. On Friday night, they had to push Cashner back because of a blister situation. He seems like he's going to be fine. He's going to pitch on the West Coast. But they called up Luis Ortiz, who, if you recall, was one of what was supposed to be the bigger pieces in the Jonathan Scope trade from Milwaukee. Luis Ortiz had a 7 ERA at Norfolk, and they called him up to the major leagues for a spot start. Now, when you have to call up someone from the minors to make a spot start, you're a prisoner of whoever's going to be fresh. I mean, you obviously can't call up the kid who started 2 nights prior because he's not on regular rest, and you're not going to be able to get 80, 90 pitches out of him. But the fact that you look at their AAA rotation and there is no one other than Aiken, who even it's not like he has dominant AAA numbers, but you just look at that rotation as far as guys on the 40-man roster and not wanting to make a 40-man roster move. It was so telling that Luis Ortiz, who in no way deserved to be in the major leagues on Friday night for that spot start against the defending world champions, but the Orioles kind of said, we don't have any other good option other than calling up some talented young kid who's not ready. And
dude, we're watching the game, and my wife's like, Ortiz, he got shot she's seeing the name, and I'm like, why are they talking so much about Ortiz? I'm like, no. Yeah. They picked him up at the corner bar and decided to start him tonight. And you wonder why it's the 3rd inning and the game's over and the sun hasn't set yet. So, against the Red Sox and the Yankees and probably the Rays and, the Twins and the Astros, some teams that they've seen lately, this is going to be very unforgiving, right? But, maybe they stay in games. I mean, I looked up, and I even tweeted this Sunday, Luke, and I know you were shocked. I was watching the game over Costas on Father's Day. But I tweeted, they're not going to be in 2-1 games in the 6th or 7th inning much. And against teams like the Red Sox, they're not going to pull those out. Against the lesser lights, when they're playing the Tigers or the White Sox, maybe they'll have a chance. Toronto, I don't know, but it feels to me like it's going to be very rare when they're in a 2-1 game in the 7th inning, and you have any thought that somebody's going to be able to come out of the bullpen and get you 3, 6, 9 outs, whatever it's going to take to win or lose a game. And then Mancini's the one guy that you feel like can hit something. If he comes up in the 7th or 8th inning with somebody on, maybe you have a chance. But how is this team going to put together 3 or 4 runs late in the game?
Well, like I said, their offense isn't good, but their offense is
better than their pitching.
More comparable to other major league teams than what their pitching is.
Sure.
Really, their pitching comes down to this. When Dylan Bundy, John Means, or Andrew Cashner pitch, and I'm not, Bundy and Cashner still have ERAs in the mid-4s. It's not like they've been Cy Young, but they've been representative. They've been legitimate.
They give you a chance to win.
Right. When you have one of those three starting pitchers on the mound, you have a chance. And even though their offense struggled on this homestand, and you just look at their numbers with runners in scoring position, I mean, they staged the comeback in the eighth inning on Sunday, but I think they were 1 for 13 with runners in scoring position at one point. I mean, they had their opportunities. There's no doubt. I mean, the Red Sox started, Brian Johnson. I mean, it's not as though Chris Sale was on the mound like he was on
because
the
Bon Scott
night.
was unavailable. There's my
yeah. So, but most nights, if they have one of those three starting pitchers going, and if their offense is swinging the way that it's capable, which again is far from great, but it's not in this historically terrible realm, then they have a chance to win. And those are the nights they typically are in close games. But to the point you made about facing bad teams, I'll just remind you, they not long ago had a 3-game series against Detroit at home, and Detroit is a bad team, lost 2 out of 3. They had a 3-game set at home against San Francisco. The Giants are a bad team. They lost 2 out of 3. So they just had a series against Toronto, who the Blue Jays came to town just a couple games ahead of the Orioles in the standings because Toronto had really gone through a period where they struggled big time. They lost 2 out of 3. So they've had some opportunities here.
Well, they're get well for everybody, right? And, this is where they're going to separate and say they're going to be the number 1 pick or the number 4 pick based on the will and the talent and the depth and the fact that they might be dealing Mancini out of here in 3 weeks or whatever. If you give me $1 right now, I'd bet it on them to have the number 1 pick. They've just separated themselves the last couple of days because Kansas City, Detroit, Miami, these teams are trying, right?
Well, Kansas City's rebuilt. Kansas City's not trying to win.
But who's going to lose bad enough to be number 1?
But that's the thing, right? I think you look at where the standings are. The Orioles came out of the weekend 2 games ahead of Kansas City for the number 1 pick, so they're 2 games worse. It's kind of weird to put it in terms of 2 games ahead, but that's really what it is.
Well, we're playing 296 ball right now.
Sure, but
it's the 300 line. That's not Mendoza. What we call the 300 line. I don't know what we call it.
The separator for me is look at the Orioles' run differential. Through 71 games, minus 151. The only other club in baseball that's more than minus 100 is Detroit, who is at minus 132, and they have 7 fewer losses than the Orioles, even though they've also played fewer games.
Well, there's no way they're not going to break the home run record, right?
What, home runs allowed? It would be difficult to fathom them not breaking it.
Well, given that it's going to get hot out. The one thing we can count on, it's going to get hot out.
Let's face the ball's juice. There's no question about that. But what the Orioles are doing is a special kind of inept when it comes to giving up home runs. And that's even with, I haven't looked recently, but it just feels like the pace has slowed down a little bit, too. And that's saying a lot because they're still giving up a ton of home runs. But it's just not as crazy as it was the first 5 weeks or so. But, but again, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning of our conversation. None of this is really shocking. It's just you were hoping a couple of their present-day pieces were playing at a higher level to be able to move. I was never convinced they were going to trade someone like Alex Cobb, who still has 2 years left on his deal. But Cashner, 3 weeks ago, that was looking better than it is now as far as being able to move him. I think you probably can, but again, what are you getting? Really, other than Bundy, other than Trey Mancini, and I think Mike Elias said it best when he was asked about Mancini specifically on the homestand. He said he's someone that they would love to have for the long haul, but they're going to listen to any opportunity to make their team better for the long run. And that's the right attitude to have there. The reality is, I love Trey Mancini. I'm a Trey Mancini guy, but he's 27. And
Mike Elias was not brought in here to be emotional, right?
Exactly, and you don't want him to be. And that's, I'm not saying you should be completely cold-hearted about everything you do, but you need to be thinking about this through the proper lens. And it's what are they looking like in 2021, 2022, 2023, and beyond? And the reality is with Trey Mancini, whatever value he's going to bring you between now and when he hits free agency is he going to bring the same value beyond that, if we're talking in terms of potentially extending him? And I don't know. I just look at a guy who at that point will be on the wrong side of 30. At that point will be, he's always been a first base type. He's playing right field and trying his best, but he's not he's not someone you want out there in a perfect world. He's a first baseman or a DH type. And again, you want to be careful not to overvalue that for a guy going into his 30s, which is what I'm talking about Trey Mancini 3 years from now. So I'm not give Trey Mancini an extension. Let me be very clear about that. My point is, if a team comes calling, whether it's this July, whether it's this winter, whether it's next July, I mean, this is a guy who's still under control for a few years, so it's not as though you have to deal him now. I want to be clear about that. But if the right opportunity comes knocking and you have a chance to pick up a guy that could be a future Trey Mancini along with someone who could settle into your starting rotation, then I think you got to do it. And you need to not be emotional and not just view it through the lens of, well, he's the only good player we have right now. Believe me, I get it. It's very frustrating for people who are watching this team on a nightly basis, and I get it, and ticket prices and all those different things we can talk about.
I went online the other day. It really was amazing. It was still $26 to sit on the roof at a Red Sox game on a week. You know what I mean? Like, literally, I just went on to see if there was like an $8 or $10, something that would, if I were in Lutherville, say, the weather's nice, I want to go down there. The weather's nice and I want to go down there, and it's a $50 cover charge and $12 beers.
Yeah.
I'll just go, I'll go up the street to the Silver Spring Mining Company, watch it on TV like I did last week,
Or I'll go watch the Keys, or I'll go watch the Bowie, or if I'm heading out to Ocean City, I'll check out a Del Marva game,
right.
Something like that. I mean, sure. They have added some more discount type nights, but yeah, they're not doing that on a nightly basis. And when the Red Sox come in, anyone who was at the ballpark, they were solid, okay crowds this weekend, but a lot of blue and red, and not shocking. I want to be clear about that, but you got to bleed all the Red Sox fans.
I was going to say, you're not from around here, are you?
Yeah, exactly. So, and believe me, I understand all those factors. I'm concerned about all those factors from a long-term standpoint, but strictly speaking, from a baseball standpoint, they have to be looking at everything through a long-term kind of lens. And if that means someone blows you away offering a haul for Trey Mancini, then I think you have to do it. And I think that's really frustrating to hear. And I know people listening are probably saying, Luke's crazy for saying that. I mean, he's the one great player they have right now, or really good player that they have right now. But again, this isn't about trying to maximize wins in 2019 or even 2020 or even 2021, most likely. It's about trying to maximize what you can do beyond that, and not just hoping for the miraculous scenario to play out that almost played out in 2012 through 16. I mean, we've talked about how the Orioles didn't make all great decisions leading up to that period. I mean, Manny Machado was a great player, and Adam Jones was a great trade for Andy McPhail, and you can kind of go through all the different things that align for them. And Buck Showalter agreed to manage that team, but the idea for Mike Elias isn't to just create another 2012 through 16 and that's it. The idea is to open up a competitive period and then maintain it with a great farm system and a talent pipeline. And we've already seen it with the draft. We're going to see it with the international signing period that starts July 2nd. The Orioles are going to sign a lot of players. And the difference now compared to the past when they signed international players is they're going to be guys that people within the baseball world have actually heard of and actually say, hey, those are some talented guys. Hey, that guy has a chance to, those guys have a chance to really blossom for this team. But again, it's going to take time. For every Adley Rutschman that's going to be on a fast track and could be here conceivably in the next year to 18 months, there are going to be plenty of guys that they sign from the Dominican, internationally, that are going to be 16, 17, 18 years old, and you're not going to hear from them for a long time. But the hope is that they continue to commit to all these different avenues of talent that they didn't in the past, that come 5, 6 years from now, and then moving forward after that, they're going to have a farm system that is going to feed the major league team, and you're not going to see a Luis Ortiz called up for a spot start when he doesn't deserve to be in the major leagues. It's going to be guys that are legitimate, but it's going to take time, and I'd love to say that they've hit the worst of it. I do think this is rock bottom from a standpoint of you can't really go any lower than where they've been over the last calendar year. But as far as the ascension, I'd be lying to you if I said that I think it's imminent.
He is Luke Jones, Luke at WNST.net and Baltimore Luke. Hey, we got Baltimore Positive happening this week and next week and the week after that. We have a full lineup. We're going to be at Fadley's on Thursday morning with Mayor Jack Young talking about all sorts of Baltimore things. Of course, Don Moeller, my partner in crime, and Kimo Sabe from Catonsville and Dundalk. We are moving downtown to Fadley's. Come have a crab cake. Come meet the mayor. Come say hello. We're at Fadley's on Thursday. The following Thursday, we're back in Catonsville with a new sponsor. We're down the street at Jennings Cafe. We're going to be having burgers and lunch, and I might even have an adult beverage there. We're going to be there with Nancy Grasmick talking about education and probably John Stedman before it's all over with. That's 2 weeks from now in advance of the Catonsville 4th of July parade. Then we're back at Fadley's the following week with Matt Gallagher, longtime political insider, as well as Ron Shapiro. There'll be incredible conversations about agents in sports and Kirby Puckett and Cal Ripken and Camden Yards and the state of the Ravens and all of that stuff. So Ron Shapiro is our Baltimore Positive guest 2 weeks from now. We're doing that show on the 2nd of July. So a couple of shows ahead. Go to BaltimorePositive.com. Learn more. And, of course, you will hear all week long Fraser Smith, my journalism, Kimo Sabe, author, Lefty Drizel stories, Len Bias stories, stories of Governor Schaefer, and his new book on journalism and putting newspapers out. Fraser Smith, the honorable and legendary Pulitzer Prize nominee, multiple-time Pulitzer Prize nominee. We did that out at State Fair in Catonsville, where I had another amazing Benedict, and you can have one too. Getting Don Moeller on, man. We're bringing the whole Catonsville Army out with us. So we'll be out at Fadley's this week, back in Catonsville the following week, and then back at Fadley's on July 2nd. And we're putting that schedule up on social media as well. Full Circle Tire and Auto, tires, and more tires. They were doing it on my nasty van up in Harford County many, many moons ago, many miles ago, many tires ago. Dave and the crew up there can take care of your AC if that's a little blinky as it's getting hot out. And from any time, anywhere, you call them, you're a call away from you're stranded. 410-676-CARS. 410-676-CARS. They will come. They will rescue you. They've done this for us. We know this for sure. Full Circle Tire and Auto. Make sure you like them on Facebook and on Twitter. Johnny D is mixing up shrimp salad right now because it's what he does. There's probably a turkey in the oven over there on a Mosky as well. They have the catering hall there, so if you have any catering needs into the fall, into the holidays, you have a family party. They've only been doing it since 1954. That's the way Johnny D does it. Johnny D's Lounge and JohnnyD'sLounge.com, the way to find them. But I smell the shrimp salad from here. Get on over there, get yourself some lunch, some dinner, and get into the hideaway at Johnny D's. We're also going to be doing some Raven shows up in Aberdeen this year, as we've done in the past. We'll be swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry and our friends at There Goes My Hero with Adams Extreme Motorsports and, of course, Adams Jeep. Follow them at Adams Jeep on Twitter. The lifetime warranty on lift kits, anything to trick your Jeep out. And if you've never ridden in a tricked-out Jeep, you're missing out. Did that once at the beach, and I wound up buying a Jeep afterward. Call Galen 410-879-5800 and build your dream Jeep today. And they throw all sorts of events. Steve's throwing some concerts up there coming up later in the summer. Tribute bands. We'll talk more about that with Steve Michaels from Adams Jeep. All right. Luke is here. Luke, I want to get back to one thing you said about juiced baseballs, chicks digging the long ball, the fact that the Orioles give up more than anyone in May in the history of the game before it's all over with. But how about this Padres-Rockies thing over the weekend? And, I've been texting with my dear friend Freddie Ullman. I'll be the guy behind home plate next Tuesday with the Tony Gwynn jersey on, just so you know. Padres come in. I'm going to go support the Padres and hang out with my pal who's been running the Padres for almost 30 years. Former Oriole as well, Freddie Ullman. And seeing this kind of offense and seeing what's going on and seeing the home run or the nothing. But I was was illuminated on Sunday night that I was a little bored late in the evening. No NHL, no NBA, golf was over. That I put on a 2-2 baseball game in the 8th inning at Dodger Stadium between the Cubs and the Dodgers. And, there's like real pitchers like Jansen on the hill and real hitters, like Bellinger at the plate. And, it was an exciting baseball game. The stands were packed at Chavez Ravine. And I thought to myself, outside of what's happening here, there is sort of life in baseball in other places, but there's also this, we're talking about juice balls and home runs and quite frankly, and I'm not being disrespectful to pigs, but I call them pig tricks, where I don't know what they're trying to do to resurrect the game, but watching the ball go over the fence and watching Chris Davis strike out every time he comes up, it's not very compelling, but I tell you what, when you're in a 14-13 game in the 8th inning, somewhere west, if you're scanning around on Major League Baseball Network, it feels a little bit like a Sega Genesis game from 30 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think it's such an interesting dynamic here. I mean, what do we say all the time about Major League Baseball? I mean, we want to grow the game for young people, and it's one of those things, and I think back to how I felt about watching baseball in the 90s and the early part of the 2000s with, at the peak of the steroid era when you saw the home run numbers just get to ridiculous levels. And at that point in time, I'm in the 90s. I grew up in the 90s. I mean, I was born in 83. So I do wonder, with all of the home runs, if that actually is more appealing to kids. I mean, if we're really being honest about it. I mean, you and I think about baseball through a more old-school kind of lens, certainly, even though I'm someone who has gotten into sabermetrics and really think differently about the game now as opposed to even 5 or 10 years ago. But, I've certainly asked whether this brand of baseball that we're seeing in 2019 is truly healthy from an entertainment standpoint. And I certainly have major doubts about that, even as someone who is fascinated by process that teams are using to develop players and whatnot. But you do look at the game and you see the number of home runs, you see the number of strikeouts. The velocity is greater than it's ever been. You have more pitchers throwing 95 or harder than at any point in the history of the game. You have more home runs than we've seen at just about any point in the history of the game, and we're seeing that just holding steady after, back around 2014, we kind of had a little bit of a power outage relative to what we had seen. But you do wonder, how is this going to, where's the market correction going to come? Are they going to quietly make the baseballs a little less lively than they've been? And I think it's obvious, because where it's most obvious, Nestor, is in AAA this year. Norfolk, for example, Harbor Park has always been considered a pitcher's park, and it was always it wasn't a secret that Orioles hitting prospects would go to Norfolk and they would put up just kind of mediocre numbers, and so much of it was because of the ballpark, or that was the perception anyway. Well, this year, those AAA guys are now using the same ball as the major leagues, which was something that was idiotic in the past. Why would you have minor league teams using a different baseball than major league teams? But what have we seen? We've seen home runs go up at the AAA level. So you do the math there as far as what the common variables are. If you're looking for why there's an offensive explosion even at AAA, well, they're using Major League Baseball. So do we see the ball corrected, so to speak, quietly, even though I know Rob Manfred has tried to dispute any notion that the ball's been juiced? But beyond that, just
what else is he going to lie about? You know what I'm saying? Like, literally.
Yeah. But beyond that, just how the game is played, and we've talked about this with the shift and launch angle and guys hitting over the infield and guys that are dealing with some nasty stuff that pitchers are throwing, and it really has become so much more of the all or nothing kind of thing, home run or strikeout, mix in a few walks there. And you do wonder how appealing it is. And like I said, even if you have young kids who really like seeing a lot of home runs, and look, home runs, if you're going to ask me, do I want more home runs or less home runs, I think I'll take fewer home runs, but I don't want home runs to disappear either. Because I don't think that's I don't think a 1915 brand of baseball is good for the major leagues either. But is there some kind of happy medium we can find? Do we start limiting shifts? Does that cause guys to try to go back to a more traditional hitting approach rather than the launch angle craze of hitting the ball in the air, hitting the ball out of the ballpark? I don't know. Some of this feels, as far as from the intellectual evolution that we've had with baseball, starting with Moneyball way back when and progressing to what we're seeing now with chips and bats and so much science and technology and edgertronic cameras and radar detection, all these different things that teams are using to not just evaluate players but develop players now. I don't know how much baseball can really do from a regulating standpoint, because I feel like some of this just feels like trying to put toothpaste back into the tube when you've kind of discovered some of these ways of playing the game that might be more efficient in trying to win, but I don't know. I really have my doubts whether it equates to a better product from an entertainment standpoint. And ultimately, that's what this is about. I mean, whoever's trying to win the World Series right now, it's still in the name of entertainment at the end of the day. The athletics are just something that a bunch of guys are doing if no one's watching it. But for it to have meaning, it needs to be something that people are really enjoying. And I'm not saying that I don't enjoy the game, but I'd be lying if I didn't have some concerns about how it's being played and where we're heading and
who's going to correct it? And who's going to be the grown-up here to say, we're going to stop science, we're going to stop analytics, we're going to change the rules, we're going to have 2-out innings, we're going to have pitchers. I mean, I don't know what they're going to have to bastardize the game to some degree. Yeah. In whether it's having the designated hitter in both. There are going to be changes, and they need to make sure that whoever's driving this thing is a real leader. And I don't ever look to Rob Manfred for that. I think Rob Manfred's a money leader. I don't think and I felt the same way about Selig. I don't feel like this thing has been driven in the fans' interest ever since they, quite frankly, threw Faye Vincent off the reservation. I mean, in the last 25 years, it has been about growing revenue, not growing interest or children or, spiritually making the game better. It's been all about selling, and hey, that's cool, but, then there's the part where I'm 50 years old and they have completely lost me. Don Moeller and Don got angry with me last Thursday. We were having breakfast together, and we got to talking about it. He's like, what do you think of this? I'm like, I'm not giving them 3 hours of my night every night. You got to be out of your mind. I got things to do. I'm 50 years old. You know what I mean? And he was indignant, and I was indignant. We moved on to another political conversation we argued about. But I don't know what they're doing when people who've loved baseball their whole life, I look at it in my little Orioles shirt with my dad, and you with your dad and the usher thing, and you're still going to the games. But if you had to give them $3,000 or $5,000 a year, Luke, to go down and have this experience and do it 29 times a year from York, Pennsylvania, and put a ball cap on and pay to park and do all that stuff, I don't know, bro. And you love you some baseball, but if you had to start paying to go instead of the other way around like everybody there, my time is the most valuable thing I have, right? Well, and that's the argument that I make, is to say, wake me when it has value to me. And I'm a baseball guy. And John Angelos doesn't give a rat's ass. He really doesn't. And I'm wondering who around there really does care to that level, about climate change, where it's not about what's going on today. It's where are you going to be in 10 years or 15 years? And if you're not going to be a part of it, I guess you don't care if you're Rob Manfred and you're sucking $20 million a year, out of the game. And it won't matter to you later on that you're just really trying to make your quarterly numbers. And around here, the quarterly numbers don't look so good, not just for the Orioles I'm talking about the industry, when the stadiums are so empty and nobody can figure it out. And this, they're about to go to war with the players, right? So, we're about to bring the spotlight not on the game and fixing the game and drugs and steroids and all of those things that we've done the last 25 years. It's going to go right back to Marvin Miller and be 1981 all over again, because there's going to be a Players Association owner war. And I don't know how the modern era manages that, who the Hawks and who the Doves and who the Bulls and who the Reinsdorfs and the Angelos, who wants war and who wants peace, right? Because they're all making money. Back in the day, there was a significant faction in the Lords of the Realm era that wanted war because they were trying to stop the costs. Now all they really are focused on is how to grow the revenue, not stopping the cost, because that's sort of built in at this point. And quite frankly, they got rid of the Steinbrenners and the guys that couldn't control themselves. Nobody went and gave Adam Jones a lot of money last year. They've at least got everybody in the room singing the same song,
Sure. I mean, when you have luxury tax thresholds and things of that nature, I mean, you in essence create a salary cap. But I think it's tough because I don't think the Orioles right now are the proper example to give for the rest of Major League Baseball because it's a pretty extreme kind of rebuild. I mean, heck, they lost 115 games last year in a season that they entered with visions of trying to win. I mean, that doesn't happen very often in the history of Major League Baseball, quite frankly. But some of the issues that you mentioned are legitimate. And look, I still love baseball. I want to be very clear about that, and I still enjoy the game today. But
when I enjoyed it in the 8th inning of a 2-2 game Sunday night watching it, it's that in that moment where I'm like, yeah, I'm in. I'm in. My wife and I were in at that moment.
Right, and I want to be, and let's be clear about the fact that at the same time, 14 to 13 games aren't the complete norm either. It's typically somewhere in the middle.
I was wondering who missed the extra point.
And even with talking about some of the home runs, I mean, you can. In some cases, you look at the end result. The scoring isn't out of whack all the time. It's more so how is it happening? Is it more home runs, fewer singles and doubles? It's how is the game being played on a pitch-to-pitch, batter-to-batter, inning-to-inning basis, and I think that's where you have more concerns. How do you curtail that, or how do you correct that, so to speak? I mean, we've already talked about the baseball. I think you could limit the shift from a standpoint of saying, and this is what they're trying in the independent minor league that the York Revolution's in, the Atlantic League, I guess it is, where you have to have 2 players on either side of second base when the ball's pitched. Now, you can, if you want to run over, you can. But even with that, even if we limit shifts, which, again, I'm very leery of trying to stifle intellectual development within the game, which that's what the shift is. It's intellectual development. These teams started collecting data, and they said, this player hits the ball on the right side of the infield X% of the time. He hardly ever hits it to the left side. So, yeah, we're going to put 3 infielders on the right side of the infield. Makes sense, right? It's a smart thing to do. It's no different than a defense adjusting to a team that's using a lot of underneath passing. You're going to play more man coverage, and you're going to try to get up in their face a little bit. So you always want to adjust. But even if you eliminate the shift, I still don't know if that means the launch angles craze is going away because, well, you hit the ball in the air and you drive the ball, and you're going to score more runs that way. So I think whoever is in charge or whoever is going to be leading this up, whether we're talking about Rob Manfred or any leaders in the future, I think you do have to be really careful about changing the game because you can have unintended consequences when you make a change. So I'm not saying leave it alone. I'm saying you need to really do your homework, and that's why I do like the fact that MLB partnered with the Atlantic League to look at some of these things. I don't think it's happening this year, but I think there's still plans for them to move the pitching mound back a couple feet and see what that impact, what impact is there. So you need to try different things, and you need to be careful, and it needs to be thoughtful, and it can't be viewed as a quick fix because I think there are a few measures here and there that can be introduced that will get the game a little more back to a kosher state, so to speak, whatever that is at this point in time, because the game's changed a lot over the years. Over generations, it's changed a lot. So I want to be careful that what I prefer as baseball isn't what everyone else is going to prefer necessarily, but can we get things back to a little more, quote, normal, I guess? And how they do that remains to be seen. And as you mentioned, a potential labor war a few years from now looming, that that's something that's a much greater concern for me because I've said this to you throughout the offseason. If you're not going to pay players over the age of 30, that's fine. If you don't value players that are at that stage in their career, that's fine. But guess what? You need to redistribute that wealth to the younger players, and then we need to see arbitration and club control and the draft and all of those different things revamped in a way that the players are getting their fair share of the pie because no one wants to just see a bunch of owners pocket more money, and that's what this has turned into in recent off seasons. So there's definitely changes around the corner for baseball. I'm concerned and want it to be the right changes that are going to grow the game from an entertainment standpoint, grow it from a financially viable standpoint, and grow it from a standpoint of markets like Baltimore all the way up to whoever else you want to talk about from the Dodgers, let's say, that the game remains something that people want to check out and it remains healthy because I still love baseball, but there are certainly things that I look at and I am concerned.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter and Luke at WNST.net. Baltimore Positive coming to Fadley's to see Jack Young, our mayor, on Thursday. We're going to be at Jennings next week as well, and we're going to be going back to State Fair, doing all that stuff. Learn more at BaltimorePositive.com. I got to shout out all of our sponsors. I was at Costas over the weekend with my wife having a little... I've been to a lot of my sponsors this week. We had some crab at Pier at Costas, had a delicious steak at Roost Chris down at Pier 5. Love walking around downtown, part of our Baltimore Positive initiative, going over to Pier 6 and seeing Slightly Stupid last week. We've been banging around town. Curio Wellness is up in Timonium as well, just south of York Road. You hear Brian Sanderoff around here talking about the holistic wellness, the cannabis education, and one-on-one classes they have there once a month on Wednesday nights. You can learn more on their events calendar at Curio Wellness. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I am on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and Instagram and streaming live on our Facebook. Don't forget the buyatoyota.com audio vault there 24 hours a day. From anywhere in the world, you can listen to all of our Orioles, Ravens stuff. I am putting together a massive collection of Hall of Fame conversations in July. Baseball, football, rock and roll, and then just basic legends. So the entire month of July to celebrate 21 years here at WNST. It's our 21st anniversary. We're going to do a month of Hall of Fame chatter around here during July. So I am looking forward to that. I am working hard behind the scenes, putting that and Sparky Anderson and A-Rod and Tommy Lasorda and Earl Weaver and old school Cal Ripken and Mike Messina chats. Oh, yes. We've got it all stored up. From cassette, mini disc, 8-track tapes, reel-to-reel with Charlie Ekman. It's going to be a good month around here. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.